A quick note from me, your host, about something close to my heart. I want to thank Creative Space for supporting this episode. Creative Space is a co working community that's been invaluable to me. It's a space where solo professionals and change makers gather. People focus on projects that support people and planet, aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Inner Development Goals. This community perfectly matches Stories for the Future's values through its focus on collaboration, diversity, and meaningful support. If you're self employed or moving towards solopreneurship, visit getcreativespace.com to join our supportive international community. Hello, and welcome back to another episode. I have what you might call a luxury problem. With so many great conversations already recorded, choosing just one for this final episode before my short summer break was really challenging. But I believe that the guest that I selected will give you the perfect boost heading into summer, especially if you're considering a career move or currently job hunting after leaving a previous position. My guest today is Keith Anderson, a career transformation coach who went from working as an English teacher to leading in tech roles at companies like Google, Uber, and Meta. Now, through his business Career Alchemy, he helps others do the same, not just find a job, but attract one. Keith's approach is a blend between storytelling, personal branding, and something he calls back channeling, all designed to help you stand out even in a tough market. And he doesn't just focus on your next job, his mission is to help you build long-term career resilience in a landscape that's shifting fast, especially now with AI changing the game. So if you've been thinking about making a change or feeling out of sync with your current role, this episode is full of encouragement, perspective, and plenty of practical wisdom. I would actually say that it goes really well with my own mini-series that I have been posting on Mondays lately, The Quiet Pivot. Keith and I are really well aligned on so many things. So, let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Keith. I'm so happy to have you here.
Me too. I'm really excited to be talking with you and sharing my story and how I work with people with your listeners.
You call yourself a career alchemist. So in this time where more and more people are facing insecurity in their professional lives, for a number of reasons all over the world, but maybe especially where you're based in the
Yeah.
US,
Yeah.
I think that you're a perfect guest to have on. So
Yeah.
maybe just to kind of jump straight into the meat of the potato, is that what we say?
The meat, the meat and the
The
potatoes.
meat in the potato.
The meat and the potato. I don't know if that's. I have
Right.
had that before, so I don't know if that's a thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah. It says on your website, it's time to stop searching for jobs and start attracting them.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And in the same go, just tell us about your business.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, the kind of traditional approach to a job search is apply to jobs online and
Mm.
pray and hope that the recruiter or someone reaches out and then be so grateful or thankful or excited that they reached out, right?
Mm.
And that's coming from a place of, honestly, a strong word, but either desperation or not from a place of power, right? So
Mm.
um people if you think of it like a marketing funnel, right? And we look at it from a bit more of that sense, really, it's about making yourself sticky, what I call. So your digital presence is really, attracting people to you where they're not swiping left, like on Tinder, right? They're actually either shortlisting you or they're interested in learning more about you, right? And then from there, it's about building out something I call back channeling, where you're not just going through that like typical apply and pray and hope, right? But you're meeting people strategically in these companies that they're not the hiring manager, they're not the recruiter, but there's other people that are close to them who influence, right?
Hmm.
So, um, once you start doing that, you start building authority and credibility with people in these companies, right? So, there's much more to it, of course. My background is in neurolinguistics, so it's a very big focus on um, these tried and true scientifically proven approaches and applying them to that, right? So that's essentially the bread and butter of what this looks like. And on average, the person I work with lands a role within 3.4 months. And yes, now in the United States, as you said, the economy is shifting, the job market is
Mm.
shifting, and that's still the case though. My clients land roles within 3.4 months with a salary increase of 25,000. Uh,
Yes.
so that is essentially what I mean by attracting a career versus just searching and hunting, job hunt, right?
Mm.
Not and that's not empowering. Um, and then my business career, Alchemy, really, I work a lot with people who have been in a career that might have been in alignment and something that they really enjoyed at one part of their life, right? But now it's no longer in sync with who they are and who they're becoming. So they're
Mm.
really looking for what that next stage of their career is. Some people have breadcrumbs of what they want to do. Others are completely new, right? Trying to figure things out. But like at the end of the day, it's really taking where you're at now and something that can seem really all over the place in terms of switching industries or switching roles and take it for me, who's made really big career transitions and helped hundreds of people do this. So you're not like doing it alone. You're not doing it without confidence and doubting yourself. You're able to do it seamlessly through building authentic connections with people so that in your top companies, they become people who advocate for you, right?
Mm.
Who are speaking positive of you in rooms you're not in. Like that's these are the types of things that we're building. And with career alchemy, a big piece of it too, once you find your magic potion, right? Or that alchemy, your kind of uniqueness,
Yeah.
essentially, your element. Um, a big piece with that too is you're able to build connections with people that it's not really just focus on your next job or a job, right? It's about long-term career growth. You meet these people and it's setting you up towards that path. And then, landing this next job is a byproduct of that. So that's essentially what it is.
Right.
That was a lot of me speaking. Any questions?
Yeah. Yeah. And now I gathered so many questions while you were
Yeah.
speaking. So, so first of all, I'm curious because I think I hear a variety of statistics when it comes to this, but I think the last number I heard was something like 70% of the jobs go through networks. So
Yeah.
would you say when you work with people, uh, would you say leave the like the normal applications altogether and
Mm,
just try to get to know people and network with
yeah.
people instead? Or is it kind of a bit of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as you said, that the number and the percentage kind of changes between 70 and 80%,
Mm,
essentially are landed on what's called the hidden job market, right?
yes.
Which is a fancy way of what you just said in terms of
Yeah.
landing roles through human connections you have with people. So, no, so similar to that, like 70 to 80%, with the clients I work with, it's adjusting their time. So it's focused 70% on, this hidden job market and a landing role that way, and then 20 to 30% on um not just applying, right? But yet making sure like different ways to make sure that you're getting your resume seen by the right people, like a
Mm,
human, not a computer, like an ATS system that's just like blocking you without anyone talking to you. So yes, it's about applying, but it's making sure that you get through that.
Right.
A real
Yeah.
human, you know?
Yes, yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
then looking at the job market at the moment, for like take the US, where a lot I watch from observe from a distance, of course, but I hear a lot about how things are changing. People's jobs might be changing a lot because suddenly you're not allowed to mention a word or a term, or your rules change and regulations, etc.,
Mhm.
etc.
Yeah.
And you said something like you can start out feeling very aligned with your job, but then suddenly it's very, very far from where you started and you feel very much out of alignment, and
Yeah.
then it might be time to make a shift. But my question then is, when the job market is so pressured, where do you draw the line? So when do you kind of say that, okay, enough is enough, I can't do this anymore, and risk to jump, if you see what I mean, when it's so tough out there?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's about taking strategic risks, right?
Yes.
Being in a job where you no longer enjoy it, you dread going to work, you know, all of those things. I believe that really our purpose in life is to be fulfilled and to be giving back, in a way that that feels very natural in your line too. If you're out of that, then that's a message that like you need to be moving. And the only constant in life is change, right? So a big piece of this and with the people I work with, that it's about change, right? And how you become comfortable with change. Now, there's a lot of different things out there, and I'm not completely discounting it, but for example, the economy, the politics. There's a lot of talk about these things, right?
Hmm.
In addition to like the job market's really bad now. Um, there's because of that, there can be a lot of limiting beliefs, right? Of like, oh, the job market's so bad, I just need to stay put. I shouldn't move forward. If if you're not ready to move forward, okay, but you can still be making connections with people, right? Learning more about
Mm.
different paths, whether you know more specifically what you want to move into or you're not sure yet. There are things you can be doing to move down that direction because, like, the lack of momentum will hold you back. And then who knows, like, 5 years pass by, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Then you say, what did I do with my life?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yes, I know.
bad. And then the last thing on this is we say like the job market is bad, right? There's still millions of people being hired. Just
Yes.
for that, so it's like, are you going to take this negative stance, right? Where you say, oh, it's so bad, it's bad, bad, bad. Or are you going to say, oh, like glass half full, right? Or like, no, there's a lot of people getting hired. You just need to use different approaches. That's, um, so yeah, does that make
Right.
sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And where do you how do you start with people? Let's say you're like you work mainly with mid-career professionals, I think. So if you feel like you either you lost your job or you're just in transition for some other reason, where do you tell people to start if they feel like, oh, I don't have any idea where to go now? Who am I? What
Yeah.
do I want to do actually? How do I let go of my previous identity as a professional in whatever,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
find what's out there?
Yeah, 100%. So this is the exact dilemma that I was
Yes.
in, when I transitioned from being a teacher into moving into tech, and essentially starting out, I had been a teacher for 8 years. I knew early on that I didn't want to do it anymore, but my friends and family kept on saying, oh, why don't you try not teaching high school, teach college? So I got my master's degree, taught college, same issues I was dealing with. Um, once what happened with me is I got very sick and I got a pneumonia and I called the HR of the university I was working at and told them and they gaslit me. They're like, oh, well, your
Mm.
students, it's the end of the semester. Your students need you. Who's going to grade their essays? Who's going to proctor the exam? And they didn't care that I was sick at all. So
Mm.
that's when I knew that I needed to gain momentum, right?
Mm.
So first, there's that usually there's like either that kick in the pants, but if there's not, the people who come to me, they're obviously coming to me realizing that something needs to change, right? So first realizing that that is something and not putting yourself down, right? Or having these self-limiting beliefs. It's like, well, the job market's bad. Well, I won't be able to make as much money. All these are assumptions and you don't really know. Those aren't
Mm.
facts. uh, so that's the first piece. And then from there, what I did and with clients that I work with, it's the same thing. It's about going within before you go out,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like I identified so much with being a teacher. I didn't know who I was, my identity outside of being a teacher, right?
Yeah.
It took me a year and a half. Now with my clients, it takes a lot less time, because
Mm.
they had a system that I didn't realize I was creating at the time,
Mm.
right? Um, but essentially, it's getting clear about who you are, right? What are your values outside of preconceived notions, what society's telling you, your family, and getting clear on like where do you see yourself moving in the next 5, 10 years, and what really is your purpose in life or purpose in your career, which is how you want to be giving back and what your legacy is, right? So
Mm.
there are these big questions, right, where you start to really dig down in yourself to explore what even this could be, right? Because at least I firmly believe that when you are making a career transition, it's not, yes, you're unhappy with what you were doing, but the next piece is not like just to get another job per se. I mean, yes, you do, but like, what's the bigger purpose, right? Because maybe that next job doesn't fit towards that isn't 100% in alignment with your North Star immediately, but it's in the process of getting you there. But if you haven't
Mm.
defined what that is or thought about that, then honestly, you're switching jobs and industries, but it's just, you're just going a job to job to job, and it's not really empowering and it's unclear where you're moving ahead in life. So
Mm.
that's where we start usually. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big job. I went through that myself. So, like,
Yeah.
yeah, but very interesting as well when you realize that I should do something like starting out trying to fit into what you see out there, what you think
Yeah.
is needed, and then trying to like just fit into that. And
Yeah.
then okay, it's not working.
Can I ask
Yeah.
you what was your journey like with that? And you've made like really big movements too.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
curious. What's for you?
Yeah, so that identity shift was a big issue for me. I didn't realize before, kind of maybe looking back, but I'm like my education background is in geophysics, petroleum
Yeah.
geophysics.
Yeah.
So that was my very strong identity, and then losing that job, trying to find something when I realized, okay, the job market for geophysicists at the moment is very bad. So I need to find something close to that, as close as possible,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trying to look at the ads and, okay, what is in need? And then just, no, it didn't feel
Yeah.
right at all. So
Yeah.
that was a journey. And then I did what you said there. I like went inwards and tried to just go back to my childhood even,
Yeah.
realizing that, oh, I used to love writing. Why did
Yeah.
I forget that? Why
Yeah.
didn't I use that for anything? So all these steps, and as you said, also really interesting that you don't find it right away. You have to kind
Yeah.
of test a little bit and be okay with, okay, that was not exactly that. I need to adjust again and again and again. And
Right.
maybe for your whole life, that is kind of the journey, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like we're all different and
Yes.
you know, it's so interesting. Like one thing you said that really resonated was you forgot, right? Like that you had such a strong interest in writing, right? And it
Yeah.
came back later. You're like, oh, why haven't I been doing this? Why hadn't that been part of it? A big piece is going back like to your childhood or different parts in your life where you had these positive moments and memories. Like, oh, you
Mm.
know, what was it about that that I liked? I'll tell you, kind of funny. I wanted to be a bus driver when I was like,
You're right.
now I that didn't come true, unfortunately, I suppose.
Never too
Uh,
late, never too late.
yeah, never too late, never too late. But what I realized is that I have a real interest and excitement around transportation, right? So
Mm.
from there, I explored a bit in my career at working in transportation in a different way. I was working at Uber in the corporate headquarters, right? But it's a company that's like focused, right, on
Mm.
transportation. Um, so like there these things that have been passions in your life, maybe they can turn into career opportunities later, or maybe it's just breadcrumbs, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah, and it's exploring and figure things out, and that's really
Yeah.
what life is, right? Like, there's
Yes, it is.
no no exact, like, plan. You can
Mm.
have guidance, right? But,
Mm.
like, you're living your own life, and that's the beauty of it, you know?
Yes,
Uh,
exactly. So what would you say is the risk of not acting or not doing anything if you feel
mm,
that this I'm totally out of alignment? What
yeah.
do you see people risking then?
Well, I mean, so much. First, when you start to realize that you're out of alignment, it's that, like, tug within you, like, "Nah, I'm not
Mm.
excited to go to work. This is meh," right?
Yes.
But what happens is the longer that goes on and festers, right? You start to have resentments. These emotions start to build up. And then from there, what tends to happen is it's not just your career where it happens with, it happens in your family where you start to get short or upset really. It affects everything, right? Your career is not like 100% compartmentalized, right?
Mm.
And like the longer this goes on, the more dissatisfaction you tend to have in life, right? So it's really about pinpointing what those pieces are that are holding you back and then identifying them and moving forward. Sometimes what happens with folks that I see is in general, they're not happy in life, but they don't realize why. And a big part of that can be their career, right? In addition to other things, right? But these career choices, if we don't move forward, we don't have momentum, and really the only constant in life is change. So you're really going against like human nature and biology or the universe, you could say.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Do you see a lot of like burnout? Like, is it a
mm,
lot, or is that just a feeling that I'm having? That
no, I think you're right. The pandemic played a very big role in uh people's burnout, mental health, and just what they're doing in life, right? Because when you're stuck inside, or even during 2020 and 2021, that also becomes a habit because you've been doing it for so long. So your life really was shifting, not
mm.
just during the pandemic, but after. Because I felt the same way as you. Um,
Mm.
and how I see burnout is, or during the pandemic, what I did, and I know a lot of other people did, was these passions that you had that were outside, maybe playing sports or connecting with people, going out with them, you're no longer able to do that. So, what's the fix? Where does your time go? It can tend to go more into work, right? So, you're working, 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 and you're at home. And you don't really have work-life balance because you're at home, and that might be where it starts. So the advice I have for that is really focus on the 4 different parts of yourself, right? So yes, your career, right? Or the intellectual side potentially of you, but also the emotional side. How are you bringing in joy? How are you doing things that light you up, right? That's
Mm.
so those are one and two. And then, from there, it's how are you connecting with something bigger to yourself, whether you call it spirituality or not just looking at the minute, but looking at the bigger picture, right? Then the last piece is your physical health, right?
Yeah.
How you take care of your body. Um, like burnout really is you're just burning the midnight oil as
Mm.
right with one of these areas and you're not acknowledging these other areas. And that's why you're just out of balance. But once you start balancing, then the burnout tends to lessen and lessen in my experience and people I work with, right? It's everything in life is about balance. We all have different
Mm.
balances. Some people have more of a skew towards working, other people towards family and what have you. But whatever that alchemy is, we can say of those pieces or the balance of those elements, we need to get in alignment with that. And when we're not, it's burnout.
Yeah, exactly. This episode is supported by Creative Space, a co-working community for solopreneurs creating a positive impact. I'm a proud member myself and I highly recommend checking it out. Learn more at getcreativespace.com.
Yeah.
How do you see I think AI? So
Mhm.
how is it affecting, as you see it, how is it affecting people in their jobs? But also, and you can take this as two different questions, but also how can you use it to both to become more, maybe more resilient in your career, but also when you're looking for a job. I've used that myself, and I think that is I think it's great fun. But how
Yeah.
have you seen it being used?
Yeah. So with AI, I mean, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in AI, but it can also be scary for people because,
Yes.
I think a lot of people feel like what is their job as like really their job is all in their brain. That's
Mm,
basically what all of us are doing or white collar roles, right? So then how are you how do you differentiate yourself with the AI?
yeah.
And my recommendation is don't pit yourself like you versus AI, but have AI enhance where you're at. So see it more like an assistant, right?
Mm,
You need to adapt to AI. You need to integrate this within your practice. If you're not, you will quickly be left behind, right? Um, Really how I see the job market moving and corporate hiring is A, on people who are able to utilize the AI, and then B, you know, people who are able to adapt in a way where they can take kind of the generic approach that AI gives you and then expand it from there, right? Really, I think it accentuates in the job market and really throughout the world, accentuates our humanness that has
mm,
become lost a lot of times where in the job market, like, so the job market really, the approach of like applying to jobs and having job postings started during the industrial age, right? So after the Middle Ages and Renaissance. So with that, I mean, that was all about working in a factory, just numbers, 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 and it doesn't really matter your brain, right? It's what you do. That's the system that we still essentially use today in terms of in the job market, right? Um, where your brain and your humanness was besides like physically manufacturing type stuff was deprioritized. So now with
mm,
AI, it's now even more so about who you are as a person. And that's your sweet spot. So really getting um, clear about who you are internally, but then also in terms of what you bring, your creative approach as a human is something that AI won't be able to replicate, right? It's not a
mm.
human, and it's not you. So that's it's an interesting time, right? Because your humanness is your secret sauce. It's not
Yes.
4 million years of experience or like you did this. It's your brain and your critical thinking, you know? So I actually think that change is nerve-wracking and can be very difficult for people, right? But overall, I actually think that it's it's really it's going to force people to get more in tune with who they are and their value, right? So it can be very empowering if you let it. Otherwise, you're going to go down the other path where
Mm.
you're disempowered, you are, sticking where you're at and you're saying AI is bad, but then it's it will replace these like roles that don't really use our human touch. So
Mm.
like you need to adapt, or if you're not doing that, then you probably will be left behind, to be honest, you know?
Yeah. Yes. How do you see people using it successfully when applying to jobs? I've
Mm.
been wondering about that. I haven't written a job application for a long time, but
Yeah.
is that something that the hiring managers see through if you use AI in
Mm,
that sense? Do you see?
that's a wonderful question. So, a lot of ways that job applicants use AI is they get the job description from a website,
Mm.
they input that into ChatGPT or another AI, then they put in their resume and they say, okay, tailor my resume towards this job description.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is if everyone is doing this technique, then you're just like everyone,
Yes. Exactly.
these are large language models, right?
Yeah.
But large language model is not infinite and it's an algorithm. So
Mm.
you're making yourself even more sound like everyone else. So,
Mm.
um, what I recommend is yes, AI is a powerful tool, but you need to use it in different ways. So, one way I recommend is through like interview prep, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these questions that are asked in interviews tend to be the same, right? And practicing and getting feedback through AI can be really, really powerful. Because the application and the interview process is also very old school, right? Like it's not about the skills and what you're able to do, it's about how you are able to talk. What I tell my clients is everything in landing a job really is about communication and perception. So, uh, it's not really about your hard skills. And,
Mm.
yeah, it's using it for interview prep and really focusing on ways you can use it to tailor and adjust your communication. So understand more about companies, right? And what are particular pain points that those companies are dealing with that you can bring up in interview processes, just as a few examples, right? So
Mm.
research, it's great for, and then communication can be really helpful for it.
Yeah.
That's what I recommend, not just tailoring your resume. Use it a little bit for it, but like don't
Yes.
use it too much. Otherwise, you just sound generic.
Exactly. That's great advice. On that note, actually, talking about communication, it was this news story in a Norwegian like main TV channel or radio channel this week about a guy who he had been applying for jobs for I think 2 years almost.
Mm,
Great skills, great background, everything, but he was very introverted.
mm,
So his problem was not he was called into interviews, but he didn't nail that first like the first part where you have to be charming and like
yeah,
all the things that extroverted people
mm,
will shine more at.
yeah.
So how is that? Is that like a global thing? I would assume that often the interview process is more geared towards extroverted people. And
Yeah.
what would your advice be then for people who are introverted and also have great qualities and
Mm.
yeah, should be seen and heard?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you my thoughts about introversion and extroversion, right?
Mm.
Those terms or the implication there is black and white.
Yes, yeah.
Introvert, you're an extrovert. And most people are kind of ambiverts, right? With
Yeah.
most things in life, you're like a unique alchemy, you could say, of different pieces there. Um, what I would say, right, is at the end of the day, we are humans, and a human instinct is to build connections with people, right? And to get to know people for uniquely for who they are, right? So go into conversations with that in the back of your mind, seeing interviews more like an alignment meeting, right? All these conversations is alignment, just to say like whether their problems that they're facing, right? Which basically is what they're hiring for, right? They have a
Mm.
pain point. And then if you can solve that, that pain point, right? If you can, great. If you can't, that's fine. And, at the end of the day, right, I think what I believe is that there's kind of a belief that like interviewing and anything related to jobs is either A, transactional or B, about your past experience, right? Um, that's It does count your past experience, but not as much as people think, right? It's really about building this connection with someone, and it doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or introvert, right? Like there's these key things where you do need to always be actively listening, right?
Mm.
Being in the moment, right? Not, that idea of being an extrovert, which I think is an implication of being maybe more salesy or something.
Mm.
You are, um, that doesn't, that's not necessarily the right thing. And, last thing on this, I think there's also a perception that being comfortable speaking and, being great one on one is what extroverts have, but introverts don't, like very generically. But there's obstacles on both ends if we
Mm.
see these as two different sides sides of the coin, right? With an introversion, it might be difficult for folks to, not connect. I think that that's something that usually is pretty strong in a one-on-one setting, but advocate for themselves can be difficult, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's an obstacle they face. But extroversion or people who sell more that way, sometimes they can over index in their warmth, right? And
Mm.
showing their competence too, right? And speaking a lot. So, like, there's these balances where it's not like it's, I don't think it's necessarily completely geared just towards extroverts or introverts. It's that maybe you could say it's about how comfortable you are with speaking to new people that you don't know and
Yeah.
taking down this trust barrier that everyone has because they don't know you and lowering that through what I call warmth markers and competence markers, right? Which are those pieces that start to build authentic connections with people and, um, make honestly what I say is like make interviews and meeting people less like icky like,
Mm.
uncomfortable. Um,
Mm.
so that's kind of my thought around
Mm.
introvert introversion.
Yeah, and listening to you now, I think maybe this is also a question of assumptions in a
Yeah,
way, like, and the mindset that the person would go into the interview. And if you go into the interview and think that, oh, I should have been an extrovert and I would have nailed this a lot easier,
yeah.
then you have already kind of set
Mhm.
a wall behind yourself and the other person. So yes.
Self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes. Yeah,
you know, and
exactly.
and a big thing that, my original background in school was in linguistics, and that has been neurolinguistics, and that's been a real big focus of just my work ever since then in different capacities, right?
Mm.
Um, but for people who feel that they're not good communicators and aren't good speaking with people one on one or via email, there's specific tactics, right? Like very actionable tactics and words and approaches you can take that not only build your confidence, but really takes these things that maybe one interprets extroverts are good at and which are subconscious, right? And once you learn them consciously, that's where applied knowledge is powerful, right? And
Yes.
you're able to influence, right? And not just be relying on these things that aren't really identifiable or unclear because they're in your subconscious, you know?
Mm,
So,
exactly. Yes.
yeah.
Oh, this is so interesting. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah,
It's
me too.
really interesting. Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could. That's a good thing that you could talk about it forever.
yeah.
It's what you're
Sometimes too
doing.
much though, maybe. So,
Yeah, but we need to wrap up. But before we do that, if people are interested in hearing more about what you do or learning from you, where do they go? What's the
yeah,
easiest way?
definitely. So my website is one way to just learn more about me, learn more about my business, what we do, and if it seems like something is interests you, it's the program offerings that I have. You look there or the courses that I offer. In addition to that, for now, I offer complimentary 30-minute consultations. So
Great.
happy to talk to you, to anyone listening, and just see if this is something where, I can support you, whether it's in just like some quick advice on the call, or if it's something I could support you longer with that, we could explore that, right? But at the end of the day, with people I work with, I'm really, my purpose with all of this is to help people grow and be empowered in their career, not
Mm,
not disempowered, right? Which is kind of the traditional paradigm.
yes.
This is a long way of me saying, if this sounds like something you're interested in, you can check out my website at www.careeralchemylab.com. And then I'm also very big on LinkedIn, where I post every day at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard
Ooh.
Time, Boston time. Yeah, check me
Oh.
out there, follow me, connect with me, say hi. I'm a friendly person, I think. So,
Yeah, I think you
yeah,
are.
yeah.
I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can find it easily. And thank you so much for your time. I'm absolutely certain that a lot of my listeners have gotten both inspiration and perhaps also a little kick to make
Take
some
some chance.
changes if they feel like they should. So
Yeah,
thank you
good.
so
I'm
much.
glad to hear that. And that's also my intention for speaking with you and being on the podcast. It's inspiration and motivation and, let's get moving. Don't be stagnant, let's move
Yes.
forward. So amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. I hope that Keith's insight gave you a fresh perspective on what's possible, even in a shifting job market. From finding alignment and building momentum to rethinking networking and using tools like AI with intention. If you're looking for more content on career change, other changes, and interesting stuff that has to do with the future, you can find me over on Substack at viklavnes.substack.com. That's where I share reflections, tools, and resources, for instance, like the Quiet Pivot Companion Pack, which is full of exercises to support your next step if you're going through a career shift. You can also find that tool on storiesforthefuture.com/pivot, where you also can explore more of everything that I do. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, take care.